Good day, everybody. Tom Block, Keith Jones, Bob Ferrante. It is Front Row Noles meets Seminole Sidelines. Gentlemen, how are we doing today?
Doing good, doing good. How about you, Bob?
Doing great, doing great. Football, basketball, good time of year.
Keith, do you remember the days where when it was FSU Clemson week and I used to go on my rant about the ACC scheduling Operation Basketball during the week of its biggest, most marquee football game? Did that for about 4 years in a row.
Yeah, your rant, much like the FSU Clemson matchup, has waned over the years.
I was going to suggest that I don't need to do that rant. For one, basketball season's already started and the game is later in the season than when I was offering said rant. And two, it's not applicable in current situations. So that said, Bob, FSU Clemson has always been a big deal for a lot of years. And I hate to begin a show by pointing out the obvious when this is the obvious. I don't remember one where both teams were in the state of affairs that they're currently in. I don't even know how far back you go for this.
Yeah, it's a good one because I think the last time Clemson had a losing record in a season was 6-7 back in 2010. That would have been Jimbo's first year, although Florida State was quite good in Jimbo's first year in 2010. So this is a weird one, but I would also say this is one where both programs could come out with a victory on Saturday night and feel really good about themselves despite the struggles of the season.
Still a measuring stick, in other words. And I think that's fair. We know what it's like here in Tallahassee and what it's been like. I can't imagine that it's been very fun in Clemson because their drop has been larger and less expected, I would say, by the faithful, not unlike when Florida State was in its dynasty days and all of a sudden here comes Chris Ricks and Florida State goes 8-4, right? And people thought the wheels had totally fallen off the wagon. What's going on? I mean, Clemson, in a sense, is coming off of its dynasty, and they thought a bad year would be 10-2. And here they are at 3-5, and Dabo seems a little like Dabo during some of his press conferences. I don't know, Keith. What do you think their state of affairs is at present?
Well, certainly unsettled. You mentioned Ricks, and then you look at Klubnik, and basically it starts with the quarterback. And there were high expectations for that position for Clemson this year going into the season. And he has not performed well by everyone's standard and sometimes by coach and his own admission. Defensively is really the area that I've been the biggest surprised by. Offenses can come and go. I get that. It's so contingent upon the play of the quarterback. But it's been a very big fall off defensively for Clemson because that was a unit that was always stout.
And they have NFL players.
Yes. Yeah, they'll be playing on Sundays. They just haven't played well together. Now, whether that's team morale and locker room or whether that's coaching or whether that's scheme, I'm not there day to day. I don't even have an informed opinion. But that, to me, has been the biggest thing that has surprised me. And hopefully Saturday night is not the night when they get it all back together.
Obviously, we're not there, so hard to say. And I can't claim that I've studied Clemson very deeply this year. I have not. But having been around Florida State and just thinking about what Clemson's going through, it feels like confidence and or doubt is such a primary element to these sort of things. In other words, if you go into a game or a play or a coverage believing that you're going to win that play, it just makes such a difference. I know that I always go back to this coach cliche stuff, but I think at Clemson right now, I imagine that everybody at every position, there's a little bit of that doubt creeping in the mind, and there's the second guessing that comes in. Is this really the best play call? Are we really working, practicing the way we should be? All these things, clutter, as Jimbo would call it, that people I'm sure are asking on the Clemson boards right now. It feels like there's got to be a lot of that going on at Clemson, Bob.
It feels like, I agree with you guys. The talent is definitely there, especially at receiver, say on the offensive side of the ball. On defense, we think there's some first round, second round picks there. Tom Allen's the new defensive coordinator. I highly respected, defensive coordinator, coach, a lot of Tampa ties, a guy who Tom Allen's been here for recruiting camps, satellite camps at Florida State's campus. So he knows talent and scours the Southeast for talent really, really well. It's just not fitting? Is it a year one issue? I think there's enough talent to scare Florida State. I think even through Klubnik's struggles, they can throw the ball. They can sling it around. They've had some injuries at receiver with Wesco down now for the season, but this is a scary offense in terms of they can put up 45. Their problem is they couldn't stop the 46 from Duke, as well as that kind of phantom flag late in that game against the Blue Devils.
One of the most unbelievable statistics. I've got a couple of them. The first, for me, unbelievable statistic in college football is Miami winning. It was either 53 or 56 consecutive home games in the old Orange Bowl. I can't see that ever being approached in today's world. The other thing that they threw up when I was watching the Clemson game, Clemson had won 134 games. They had never lost a game in the history of the program when they score 45 or more points. And the first time it happens is against Duke. No disrespect to Duke. They got a very good ball club this year. So you're just seeing some things, guys, that are so far out of the ordinary, they've never happened before. That's the kind of the world of college football right now.
Clemson's lost 6 straight at home, where Florida State has not had a very good time over the last 2 decades or so in terms of success. 6 straight at home to Power 4 opponents for Clemson as FSU goes in there this week. So, yeah, it is crazy. Just looking at the statistics, and we'll talk more about the Florida State side of the ledger in our next segment because we're 10 minutes in. We haven't even acknowledged the fact that FSU looked pretty good against Wake Forest last week, right? Keith and I did that on Sunday, so we'll get to that. I'm wondering how much the situational play is what's affecting Clemson. For example, on third downs, FSU is converting 53%, which is one of the best numbers in the nation, and Clemson's at 38%. So it's a 15% difference there on a possession snap. And then in the red zone, it's not that Clemson's bad, so maybe comparing to Florida State, who's been pretty good. I mean, Clemson is 85% in the red zone, FSU's 90%. On touchdowns, Clemson's 65%, and FSU's like 75%. So there's a difference there too in terms of situational, and that makes a difference. And when you look at Clemson's schedule, by the way, they still have to go to Louisville and to South Carolina. And I know South Carolina is struggling and fired its offensive coordinator, but that's a rivalry game. And Williams-Brice, and a couple of years ago they lost there. I mean, if Clemson doesn't win this week, it's really going to be bad in Death Valley.
And I know Florida State faithful are, big fans, but when we talk about fanatic and fandom, Clemson's off the charts. I mean, I can only imagine what the conversations are, over an adult beverage and or while sitting in the stadium at Memorial Death Valley. I can only imagine. It would certainly be other than PG rated, I would think.
Let me ask you real quick, and then again, we will get to FSU. Also talk basketball. Congrats to Luke Laux, who got a first win, or I shouldn't say a first win. He won his debut. It's not like he's tried 27 times and finally got a first win. Apologies, Luke. I didn't phrase that very well. So the Noles basketball team won last night. Here's my question. Dabo has been at the top for so long that this year right now, maybe it's the start of a trend. Maybe you could argue that Clemson has dipped a little bit over the last couple of years. That probably wouldn't be that tough an argument to make. But the point I'm making is that Dabo is still revered, and he could hit the emergency exit or the escape hatch pretty easily and take one of these other jobs that are open, I would think. That would be a way to reset things if you're Dabo. Do you think he will do that when you look at the jobs that are open?
Ooh. We always talked about Alabama as being the one that he might covet. I don't. Here's the other thing. Does LSU's going to want somebody big, and the governor's already involved in that job search, right? So that one doesn't feel like it. I'm not sure. Is Arkansas better? Is Auburn better? I mean, it is in the eye of the beholder of the man taking a job. Does he view a job as better than where he's currently at? I would argue Dabo wants to figure out how to correct this and thinks about his legacy, honestly, as far as, can I figure this out? Who can help me figure it out? Who do I need to hire? Does he need to be in the transfer portal a little bit more? I know he dipped in it to some extent. I wonder if his, I don't want to say ego in a negative sense, if his just desire to protect his legacy goes to the forefront there.
Well, unlike some of the other potential candidates, whether they're still with their club or have been released, and this is no terrible negative, but Dabo has to stay in the South. He can't coach at Penn State, for example. He couldn't coach on the West Coast. His temperament, his makeup is just such that, he fits better. And then you start looking at some of the things that are available. I mean, is Auburn better than Clemson? I mean, Auburn's got a losing record over the last 2 or 3 years. Is, LSU better than Clemson? They probably have more resources. Tom could speak to that. But, would that be considered a lateral move as opposed to a move up, et cetera, et cetera? And I'm with you, Bob. I think his drive, his ego, if you want to call it that, but those things that he marches to, the drum beat that he marches to, I think compels him to stay at Clemson and get back to where they were.
Ego's always a factor on that. And I agree with you, Keith. Penn State would be a bad fit. I think he's got to stay in the South too. Virginia Tech's open. That would be staying in the ACC, right? But so at Auburn, is Auburn going to hire an Alabama guy, even one that's had that success? I mean, do they look past that? LSU would be a pretty good fit for Dabo because he wouldn't have to worry about screwing up the nickname of the stadium. He could still go with Death Valley, Tigers. I mean, and as long as
he wouldn't have to change his accent, wouldn't have to try to pretend to be Southern.
As long as he's not colorblind, he could figure out which Tiger gear to wear, right? Pull it out of the closet. So, but I don't know if that's what LSU's looking for, because when you're in the SEC, you want somebody that's cut their teeth in the SEC, right? So anybody else you look down upon. So I don't know if that's where they would go. Anyway, all right, let's take a break. Let's talk about the Florida State side of the ledger. Also basketball talk ahead. Stay with us here on Front Row Noles.
Hey Seminole fans, Alumni Hall is your ultimate FSU shopping experience and has moved to a new location off Timberlane Road in Tallahassee. Shop FSU gear from Nike, Champion, New Era, Yeti, and more. Alumni Hall has Seminole gear for the entire family, plus accessories and gifts. Spend $150 and you'll earn $10 off your next purchase with their Hall Pass rewards. Stop by their new location on Timberlane Road near REI, or shop anytime online at alumnihall.com. Alumni Hall, where Seminole fans shop.
Back on Front Row Noles, Tom Block, Keith Jones, Bob Ferrante with you. That was a lot of Clemson talk. So maybe we should talk Florida State. Bob, Keith and I discussed this on Sunday, but I'm curious your opinion. Did you think that Tommy looked a little better in terms of mobility and maybe spring in the step?
I thought he looked better, but also I was watching those ankles and in the pregame, it looked like they were wrapped pretty heavily. Again, his fourth gear is better than a lot of people's fifth gear at the quarterback position out there. I thought he moved around well enough, and that's his elite skill set, is that Houdini quality. I thought he made some really dynamite throws down the field. And that one to Duce Robinson was pretty high down the sideline, but Duce being 6'6" hauled it in. I think this bye week was great for a lot of the players who had just put it all out there. Some of the guys, even James Williams, when he talked to us in the interview room, he said, you weren't getting the best of a number of players for 4 games there through that losing streak. And he mentioned Tommy and Randy Pittman. So I think at some point you take the hat off to some of these guys who are trying to play through not necessarily an injury, but just a lot of significant bumps and bruises that, maybe you lean on some of that depth that you might have in past years at Florida State. I don't think there's enough depth at a lot of positions where, the coaches can say, okay, this is the week where you sit down Randy Pittman and you go to somebody else and you feel really good about it. They've obviously had to do that a couple of times, but it felt like Tommy was back to at least fourth gear, I would say. But I do wonder, as these hits accumulate, Clemson, Virginia Tech on through the schedule, what does he look down the stretch?
I agree. I think that was what Keith and I came to on Sunday too. He looked better, but he didn't look as fresh as what he was against Alabama. Like, that ability still wasn't there, and that's affected the offense. Although when you look at the numbers, I mean, and I know there were the 2 games that stat padded early on. There's always one of those games every year, right? This year FSU had 2, but they're still well over 500 yards. I mean, they're right at the top nationally in terms of all these statistics. And I agree, he threw the ball well, Keith. I don't know if can he replicate that week to week, because to the point about Clemson's defense, the area where they've struggled the most, and Dabo's not been hesitant to point it out, is the secondary. And in particular, Dabo called out his safeties this week and basically said they were terrible. That's a paraphrase, but he wasn't very complimentary of the safety play there. So are there opportunities for FSU this week again?
I think there are. I want to go to the bye week and make an observation in that. It was expressed publicly, but I know it was done privately extensively. They went back and re-scouted themselves. They took that downtime to get in with the analyst and on the offensive side of the ball. What traps have we gotten into? What comfort levels do we need to get out of? What do we need to change up? What do we need to do to be different? And I think that also, i.e., play calling, went into part of the reason why Tommy was a lot more effective last time out. And, Malzahn basically said that, that bye week is an opportunity to self-scout. And you got to make sure you're not developing bad tendencies from a play calling standpoint. Now, from a health standpoint, that's always day to day and week to week. We talked about going into the season that, Tommy's not a big guy. He's a little bit smaller in frame. And he's been relatively injury-free during his career. But you never know about the bumps and bruises. I mean, my sophomore year, I had a really bad left ankle. And this is no surprise, statute of limitations up, but I took injections just, a number of games just to be able to play. And then my junior and senior year, again, we were running 5.0 40s and, 12-minute miles when the dinosaurs were up in the stands watching the games. But it was just better. It was just better. I felt better. I performed better. I did better. When you've got a nagging injury and some bumps and bruises, it wears on you. It's just a part of the game. The great players, the truly great players, can play through that type of thing, and it does not affect their ability to perform as much.
Just one point of clarification, Keith. Were the dinosaurs up in the stands watching the game, or were the dinosaurs roaming the earth? Because we've had different iterations of that from you historically.
I'm on advice of counsel, I'm going to exercise my personal right to claim the fifth.
I get away with asking so many more things of you when we're doing this virtually and not in the same room. It's been a good thing. That's been one good thing about keeping our distance here. Couldn't get away with that back when we were in the studio together, Bob. To me, with Tommy, certainly he's taken hits. It almost looks like I did think there was more spring in the step, but it looks like he doesn't 100% trust that foot to make that one more cut and take off. So he's still sliding down or going down at time. You want him to slide, but he's done it a little bit more probably. That's just me, and I don't know. And FSU, I don't think, has ever confirmed that he has an ankle injury. They've just kind of said, yeah, he got banged up or he's been hurt. So we don't really know what it is. We're making a lot of assumptions. We all saw him hop off the field in a game earlier this year. Do you agree with that, Bob or Keith, just in terms of, just a little bit of hesitancy to put that foot in the ground one last time?
Yeah, I think that game he limped off was like Kent State. So it's been a while since then where he goes to the sideline, goes to the locker room, jogs back out. I think it was early third quarter. And this is the era where the NFL injury report specifies the type of injury, and the college football availability report, as I've been clarified on, they're just going to say probable, questionable, out. And we're never really going to know, I don't think, what the injury is unless it happens in front of our eyes in a game. I think there is a hesitation for him to take off. And again, that's his elite trait, is that he can scramble for yards. I might argue that he's got enough, I don't want to call it pocket mobility, because he's clearly getting out of the pocket at times to throw downfield, but his just general elusiveness is still a pretty good trait. I would say, right, that he can buy time to then throw it down the field. It just becomes scramble rules. It's not the rhythm passing game I think a lot of people are looking for, but it is functional. I think it was a chunk play offense against Wake Forest too, that he was able to find some throws down the field. It works, and it works against Wake Forest. Is it a formula that can function for 4 more games with success? I think is a big question.
Well, here's the thing, though, from a game planning standpoint, if the secondary at Clemson is viewed as being somewhat weak, a way to attack that secondary is to move the pocket so that those scramble rules come into play. Because if you're not playing well defensively in the backfield, you're going to play a lot less well when the quarterback is moving. It's just the nature of how that works. So, maybe you take 10 pass plays that you would normally leave him in the pocket and you roll him out right or left just to create that different look for that secondary. And you've got some receivers that have demonstrated, and Micah and Duce, that they'll go up and get the ball. So you don't have to be necessarily precise in where you deliver it. You just got to get it out there to them.
Let's talk about Duce when we come back, because he's putting together a phenomenal highlight reel this year. No question about that. Front Row Noles continues right after this.
The Osceola, which has provided Seminole fans reliable Florida State sports coverage for 44 years, has launched the Osceola Shop, a merchandise store exclusively with Osceola's iconic branded polos, t-shirts, caps, and drinkware. Like the Osceola? Rock its iconic brand with our merch at theosceolashop.com. Are you an Osceola subscriber yet? You join today at a 31% discount and get full access to all our reporting, as well as $25 off your first purchase at the Osceola Shop, as well as 15% off all future purchases at the Osceola Shop and purchases of FSU licensed merchandise at alumnihall.com.
Back on Front Row Noles, it's Florida State Clemson week. Feels like it, right? Florida State Clemson under the lights, prime time, Death Valley this coming week. Tigers 3-5, the Noles 4-4. All right, Duce Robinson, mentioned him before the break. 6'6", and runs pretty damn well for a guy who's 6'6". And Florida State has had some big receivers historically, but just thinking about the most recent ones, Johnny Wilson was very inconsistent in terms of catches and drops. Benjamin had his one really good year, and he was so physical and big that he would outfight guys for the ball. But I don't remember the circus-type catches with either of those guys that we've seen from Duce. I mean, he's done a little bit of everything. The catch he had the other night, that's not the first time he's made a catch like that. He did that earlier this year, and I don't know, week 2 or 3, he had one of those type catches. What comes to mind for you, Keith, in terms, you've seen the Florida State program for a while. Does he remind you of anybody that's worn garnet and gold?
Well, not necessarily those worn garnet and gold, but one of the things that we've started seeing is the taller receivers that have pretty well-developed basketball skills. They know how to use their body to shield. They know how to catch the ball at the high point, much like you would obviously on a rebound. So when you've got those innate basketball type skills with that big frame, then those circus type catches are a little better. The analogy I'm going to make, you guys are going to disagree with, and our fans are going to be upset with me, but he reminds me of Chris Collinsworth back in the day. Chris had an okay college career, but he played on a 10-1 Florida team his junior year. But, he goes to Cincinnati, and he has a pretty good professional career. They make the Super Bowl one year. He's pretty highly regarded, and he would go up and make those types of catches. And obviously the reference is simply the frame. Chris is 6'6", 6'7". He wasn't a speedster. Duce is not a speedster at that height. But they remind me a lot of each other. And I mean that as a compliment to Duce. And I think he still has some upside. I don't think he's hit that ceiling yet at all.
I don't think so either, but he's going to test very well. It'll be interesting to see if he comes back or if he's gone after this year. Looking at his numbers, 34 catches for 689 with 4 touchdowns, averaging over 20 yards a catch, 86 yards per game. So he's got an outside shot at getting a 1,000-yard receiving season here. Obviously, if Florida State finishes the way, if they're successful in this last third of the season and get some W's, he's going to come close to that 1,000-yard mark. And if they don't, and if they're, going sub 500 over this last 4, then Duce probably isn't playing as well.
I like the basketball discussion there. I think he uses leverage. He uses his physicality really, really well. It's sort of a cop-out just to say, well, he's successful because he's 6'6". He is, and he has that catch radius. But I like he just understands football so well. I think he understands the spacing. He understands how to beat that defensive back. And yes, he's playing against guys who are 6-8 inches shorter at times. There are inherent height advantages, but I just see a very, very smart player. I know coming out of high school too, he was viewed as a tight end. And I think I get that. But again, with that type of athleticism, that ability, you don't really want that guy lined up as an inline blocker. You could have probably put weight on him and tried it, but that is truly a cheat code type of receiver with just his intelligence, his work ethic, the physicality, how he plays is very remarkable. And I'm with you. He's going to have a really tough decision about going pro. I think every Florida State's fan is saying, well, that's a guy you can build around. You can attract a quarterback out of the transfer portal if you don't think Kevin Sperry's the guy or Brock Glenn's the guy. You can very much use some of your revenue share money to say, well, we'll come play with a guy like Duce Robinson in 2026. It's an attractive maybe conversation for Mike Norvell to have.
I mentioned a couple of tall guys and didn't mention Keon Coleman. I think because Keon played with a guy who was 2 inches taller than him, I don't think of him as being the tall guy, even though he was 6'4", right? But I don't know what other Bruce was saying way back with the Fab Four, but it's not like there's been a ton of 6'5" receivers here other than the ones we mentioned. Anyway, it's been fun to watch him this year. Going back to this game this week, and then we'll get to basketball in the next segment. But what do you see as the keys? And I'll throw out one that it's easy to say this because when it goes this way, you feel like the fast start is what did it. But playing from ahead, right? You take the crowd out of it. You don't do what you did at Stanford where they're in the game and then their crowd gets into it, or Pitt's on the road and you give them hope because you let them stay in the game and then they get it in the fourth quarter. Having success early, I mean, that's kind of been the recipe for Florida State's wins. Against Virginia, they didn't do that. To their credit, they did come back and take the lead, but then they relinquished it. So, but more than that, I mean, I feel like the offense will have success against Clemson, but defensively, this is totally different than what they saw at Wake Forest because, candidly, Wake Forest quarterback couldn't complete a pass over the middle of the field. And Klubnik is going to throw for 350 yards this week because that's what he does, and they're going to hit a lot of those RPO slants and that sort of thing. I mean, so it feels like to win this game, it has to be more akin to what Duke did last week than getting away with a 20-17 game. Agree? Disagree?
I think you can classify this game as a potential shootout. There's no question, or a blowout, depending on who gets ahead first.
Yeah, it just feels like that.
Right? Yeah, shootouts get scary for sure. You worry about the crossing passes. I think that's what Pitt got Florida State on a lot, was the Desmond Reed type, just a slippery guy that's almost impossible for a linebacker to cover. You start to question not just linebackers and their ability to cover, but do you run more safeties out there? Do you run more corners out there? Do you want as many speed guys to potentially limit those shorter throws and don't make them those chunk longer gains in the passing game?
Yeah, it feels like not just Pitt, Virginia really killed Florida State. You know, the mesh routes have been an issue, and then between the second and third level, you know, when Florida State's been in zone, that's what Virginia exploited, you know, like over the backer's head, but in front of the safeties kind of thing. And it feels like I'm not convinced that Florida State got that much better defensively based on Wake Forest passing game. That said, I did like the effort. And I guess, and this is maybe going back to the obvious that we didn't talk about, Keith, you and I talked about it on Sunday. If there was any question about whether this Florida State team was going to continue to play hard for Mike Norvell, I think that had to go away with what we saw against Wake Forest, because that, it was far from a perfect game, and Wake imploded, and a lot of self-inflicted stuff for Wake, which was nice to see an FSU opponent do that. But in terms of effort and energy on the sideline, that was maybe as good as it's been since the Alabama game, which I think was a little unexpected given that it was homecoming. It was a Wake Forest team that excites nobody on a regular basis. Do you agree with that, Bob?
Yeah, it felt like I think we heard a lot of the players talking leading up to the game. I think it was even Duce Robinson after the Stanford game. He said, we need to show more energy, more enthusiasm on the sidelines. You need to bring that type of juice to the game. I think there was an interesting comment after Stanford, given what their crowds typically are like, and it's not the typical crowd. You fast forward to Wake Forest, where the Florida State fan base is maybe a little bit skeptical about just what they're going to see from the home team. The opponent is not highly regarded, despite the record. I thought the way Florida State took it to Wake, not necessarily the first quarter because it was kind of a scoreless first quarter, but really that second and third quarter, it felt like they were in control most of the way. And the enthusiasm on the sideline was very much encouraging. And then they sort of fed off the shirtless guys in the crowd and enjoyed that moment as far as just building off the enthusiasm there. So I think I don't worry about players getting up for a rivalry game. Jerry's talked about this a lot. Keith, maybe you can speak to it, but Jerry said Coach Bowden used to always say that you can only get up for so many games a year. You can't get up for all 11 of them at that point. You can only really get guys fired up for the rivalry games, for those really big matchups. And maybe it just is hard. The length of the schedule, the injuries, perhaps the lack of depth across the roster. It can just be really tough to get guys up every single week to deliver that effort that you need just to win week in and week out. But you feel like that's not an issue for Clemson week, especially when you're on the road and you're going to have that juice of that type of atmosphere.
Yeah, if you don't get excited about this game, you need to turn your helmet in and go sit in the stands. This creates the enthusiasm itself. Two observations, gang, on the defensive side. I think Coach White actually did what he said he was going to do, and he dumbed down the defense a little bit, made it a little bit more simplistic. And number two, back to your comment, Tommy, the question that you always ask when teams are not performing well is, has the coach lost the locker room? Are kids not listening anymore? And there were reports out 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago that, it appeared that was happening. We're not there. The people who probably said that it wasn't happening, they probably weren't there either. It's just supposition. But when you see a team come out like they did against Wake, and you see kids after the game have some of the quotes that they had, I have no doubt in my mind, again, I'm not there, it's just an opinion, but I have no doubt in my mind that Norvell still has command of this team, and they listen to him.
All right. Basketball talk and a conspiracy theory right after this on Front Row Noles.
Since 1982, the Osceola has provided reliable coverage of Seminole sports and now offers a free daily newsletter with the option to upgrade to full access with a paid subscription. For more information about free or premium subscriptions, visit theosceola.com. Get 31% off your first year subscription and receive $25 off any Osceola branded merch. Visit theosceola.com.
One segment to go, fellas. You want to talk conspiracy first, or let's talk Luke Lax first, because I've teased him and we've left this alone. So, Bob, you were at the game. This is a team. If you cross half court and you're open and you don't shoot, you got to run gassers after the game, right? Is that the Luke Lax offensive philosophy, pretty much?
There was some shot selection decisions that I thought, oh boy, I'm not sure I'm taking that from that deep, beyond the arc. It's a fun, fast pace. I've used frenetic as the term. What's impressive is they don't turn it over considering the pace. They seem to be at least on the same page in our viewpoint, even though Robert McCray, who had school record in assists on Tuesday night, he said, well, our pace wasn't as fast as the Alabama game, but we think we have a pace that can be faster. Again, for those who follow college basketball, maybe January, February, and especially into March, this is a team you might want to check out early because the schedule is really, really good. The pace is fun. They're going to score points in bunches. They've scored more points than any team did last year, more three-pointers than the team did last year. I think they had 13, and last year's group had 11 or 10 in a couple of games. So this is a team that's going to be very, very fun to watch. It doesn't mean they're going to win all these great matchups, the Houstons and the Daytons, but it's almost like the team that you want to make sure you get out and watch at least once or twice in person and watch them on TV.
We had Laux on a couple of weeks ago, and he made his comment, Tommy, and Bob, you remember this when, he's not going to be exactly like Coach Hamilton. He doesn't have 6 or 7 7-footers sitting on the bench, but I think his legacy, when everything's said and done, is, we are going to shoot threes. So if you can't shoot threes, don't come to Florida State. I don't care how tall or short you are. That's going to kind of be his thing. The other thing is they're just playing aggressively. They're playing loose. Luke was kind of like that. Luke was even aloof when he was the point guard. He just never got rattled. He never got upset. I can't remember, but maybe a time or two where he lost his cool. He was always composed, but he was always moving, and he was always looking, and he was always doing as a player. And, can't help but think that that's going to carry over into his coaching style.
So is the offense pretty much louch to snare when you're at Cameron at the end? Like just up the court in 5 seconds, pull the trigger on the three? That's what we're going to see?
I don't know if it'll be that pronounced, but maybe he'll have 2 or 3 snares and not just one.
I know it's against the rules, Bob, but thinking about this, because it's an NBA style, it feels like Laux is going to want to petition the NCAA to be able to play loud music during play. Like if you go to an NBA game, you don't even realize the game's going on because the music is so loud. And as soon as there's a whistle, there's a promotion and there's a T-shirt cannon and there's all this stuff. I mean, that's the kind of style they play. It has to be a fun. I mean, I would think that would be an easy sell from the standpoint of, look, you're going to have a green light and we're going to shoot the ball. That part of the recruiting pitch, and now you got to have some success, but it feels like that part is going to resonate.
And I think it resonated immediately because you can show the NBA film to these transfers, and it's guys from Drexel and St. Bonaventure and Jacksonville, and they have meshed, I think, incredibly well. I thought it was interesting. Luke Laux said after the game, a lot of people at Jacksonville didn't think that Robert McRae was really a point guard over there, and he's even got Michael Fly on staff who was at Jacksonville, right? And so you start to think about, okay. There have been times, honestly, where I thought in practice, I wasn't sure if McRae was a true point because he just didn't look like it within a practice or within a scrimmage situation. And then you watch him on Tuesday night and you say, that's kind of what a point guard looks like because he is that fun distributor, but he also knows when he can shoot and picks his opportunities very, very well. And then the formula, right, is, hey, within a couple of days, they're going to sign potentially one of the best classes in the country. So they've shown to high school kids the developmental opportunities that they can provide as a staff. It can be very, very fun moving forward if Luke continues to just put that kind of brand of basketball out there. Again, the losses are going to come. This is not a team that's going to match up well. They don't have enough bigs in the post against some of those top flight type of teams that candidly have money. But he's going to be able to scheme enough, I think, within his offense and play some good defense too, to put a scare into a lot of teams out there.
Guys, I'm going way back, but I give you George McLeod. Everybody thought it was nuts when he was moved to the point guard, and that kind of worked out okay.
He would like this offense too, by the way, because he could, when he lost his weight for the latter part of his career, he really could shoot the three.
He could shoot. There is no question.
Okay, next up, the Noles play at home again on Friday night. Let's get to the conspiracy theory, Bob. I know you've seen this on the boards. The latest one is that the ACC is intentionally putting FSU on the ACC network because it's not Nielsen rated, and thus FSU is not going to get as much of the media share of the revenue pot because the ratings are not being accounted for. The floor is yours, sir.
Wow. I don't think I can buy into that one. I'd be very curious at the end of the year. I'm going to ask, ESPN's public relations, what were the ratings for every Florida State game? And what were the ratings, honestly, for a lot of ACC games? Florida State is ratings win or lose. I mean, we know this. They know this. I thought it was interesting, though, to see there are some okay matchups on ESPN and ESPN2 at 7 o'clock within the conference, but to relegate, and it really does feel like relegating Florida State and Clemson to the ACC network in November when you schedule back in December or January before you release it, you schedule this game knowing it's going to be pivotal for one team. It ends up not being. But it does feel like relegating. I will definitely acknowledge that it doesn't feel right for this type of matchup to be on the ACC network.
Guys, I go back to my standard conspiracy debunk. I think suggesting that the ACC is doing this intentionally is giving the ACC too much credit for intelligence. They're just They're just dumb. They're just dumb.
Well, I'm sorry, I shouldn't cut in because this could be a really good rant. I'm sorry, I killed the momentum. Keith, continue.
No, that's it. It's dumb.
Couple of things here. Now you can believe this or not believe this, but and you and I, we all have mutual friends that work for the TV networks and TV trucks. They would say that the league has nothing to do with assigning the games. The networks do. And so if the network wants game X on ESPN, they're going to put game X there no matter what the ACC says. And so they chose teams that are still in contention right now. The second point is I've been told that they, while it's not Nielsen rated, they do have ratings.
Oh yes,
for these games. For the last,
don't buy that. They know.
But more specifically, the last couple of years, the SEC network and the ACC network, they know those numbers. Now, what nobody has ever divulged is what does this actual media rev share look like? We don't, because the league hasn't. We don't know exactly what that looks like. I would suggest that, and I haven't taken the time to do this. If you just take FSU's top 3 or 4 games, take Bama, which set a record for a 3:30 window. The Virginia game set a Friday night record for ESPN. I'm going to guess the Stanford game probably set a 10:30 record for ESPN, plus Miami. And you just add those up, and then you look at the top 4 games for anybody else in the league. Like Florida State's already in the top 3 right there with Clemson and Miami, I guarantee you, before you factor in the rest of these. And there's plenty of other schools that have been on the ACC network a bunch. The other thing, and we'll close on this, Michael Alford talks a lot about, I think he uses 10% as the figure. And think about this in relation to the Pitt game and the fact Virginia Tech game is not a noon game. But the visiting team has a 10% higher winning percentage when they're on the road for a 12 noon game because the crowd's not into it. It's around 10%. And I don't know how far back that data goes. He talks about it all the time. Maybe it's a visiting underdog, but I think it's just a visiting team. So from that standpoint, it would have been nice to play at 12 noon this week at Clemson. But the Virginia Tech game, if you think about it, that's a night game. Wake was a night game. If that Pitt game had been a night game, maybe there's a little bit more umph and giddy up in the step, so to speak. We'll never know. But that would be the flip side. Yeah, if you're getting relegated to the ACC network, you're playing at night, but you're getting a night home game for some of those, and maybe that ends up spelling victory in the end. All right, tune in next week. More conspiracy theories, and Keith will debunk them once again by pointing out that's giving them too much credit for creating a conspiracy in the first place. Until then, Sunday, Keith and I will be back. We'll recap this Clemson affair. Bob will be back next Wednesday. He's Keith. That's Bob. I'm Tom. Thanks for tuning in to Front Row Noles.